All right, guys, got Aaron's charger in the garage. I mean, it's a little bit snowy outside and got a little bit of ice and probably down in 20-degree range, so I'm going to let this defrost for a while. It was kind of a late decision. I know a couple of you had questions on the Mix Sig and some on HScope, so I wanted to do a couple more on with the Mix Sig, because even watching my own video, I seen a couple of things I had questions about. I mean, or not questions, just curious. But I do want to run them both today on it. I mean, it's a great day for that, you know, for just getting familiar with my scope. I did put on it's a YouTube post on the community section that, like, last night I put on there, if you had any specific questions on these scopes. I'm going to try to do that earlier with a little bit more notice too. Like, if you do have a particular question and I put up a post, please just drop it in a comment, and it's really easy to, because I could tell you on the comments, but if it's a question that's, you know, you want to know before making one of these purchases, or you don't know which way you're going to go, just leave the comment. Look for the post on the community section of YouTube. If you're a subscriber, you'll get it. And if you have any questions, anything like this charger's Aaron's, it's always around. If you have any model specific questions, anything like that, most of the cars I work on, they're my friends' cars. So if you have a special, you know, request or anything, you know, always just leave a comment on either the video, or if it's one upcoming, look on the community for just the post. All right, guys, I'm going to let thaw out and get the scope set up. The genuine Chevrolet thermometer says about 37 degrees. Let's see if we can warm it up a little bit. It's better than outside right now. All right, guys, the thermometer says it's about 42, 43 degrees, so I'm going to get started. I was going to explain everything I was going to do, but I figured out just wasting some time yammering, so I'm going to just start a couple tests. I'm going to have, you know, try to hit these things with as many, you know, sensors as I can, just because I want to know. I know what everything looks like on HScope. I want to know I'm using the right scope whenever I go into this, the strong points of both and the weak points of both. Instead of sitting here and talking about it, I'll just do it as I go, because I want to have some fun myself, guys. Okay, guys, the first thing I'm going to do is just do a primary ignition and the current ramp for the ignition, so we could see on HScope first with the two channels. We'll have the primary ignition and we'll have the current ramp. See, this is a good time to put in as I go. I used these last time. I like these, just the back probes. I got another set of the Lyle Flexible. You always need these things. I mean, so kind of keep them on the Amazon frequent, but I did find these. These are electronic specialties. They're mini back probes, and they have a wire piercing cover. I used it last time to get the primary ignition on this, and what's cool about them, as you could see, all you need is the cover. They come in the kit. They come with 4 of them, and the thing I kind of liked about them too is they're also a lot smaller. So you're going to do less damage to the connectors going in with something this small, but they're not flexible. Well, they have a little flex to them, but like these, you could, you know, you could really get in some tight O2 sensors or wherever you need to get with these. This is, it'll bend a little, but they're not really, you can't do that. Okay, guys, I only want to put relevant things in like as we go, and I feel this is one of them, is whenever you develop a strategy of how you're going to go after something, or even how you're going to test something that, you know, a known good, is the first line. I always, you know, if it had a problem, it would be the scanner in our ears. That's the first, in our eyes, looking for visual inspection before you plug anything in. But once you do start hooking things up, what I like to do is just hook everything up, the leads up. Then I'll actually disconnect the number 1 channel, calibrate, and then, you know, plug it back in. But I like knowing all the leads are back probed, they're in place, they're ready to go. Then I just push my cart up to the car. Because, you know, oscilloscopes, especially if they're yours, if they're the shops, you might be pushed to, you know, beat a tool. Now, I mean, it might be worth it for them too, having it replaced. But if it's your tool, you want to take care of it. And, you know, hurry up and get me that oscilloscope is not a phrase you usually hear. You know, whenever you take out the scope, you know, They call them a lab scope for a reason. It's like, you know, your own little mobile lab on your little Harbor Freight tool cart. Yeah, that's the way it is. That's the way you got to think about it. This is your stuff. But the first thing I always do is with the cables, Handtech makes some, you know, pretty decent cables. But every time you go to use these, run your hand along them like that, because like this one, right off. You know, it's almost every set eventually do it. You could do it until this comes off, and then if you have another set, but if you only got Handtech leads, you might want to take these apart. There's just a set screw in there. Some of them are soldered and some are just a set screw. But what is nice about the Handtech leads is they are stackable. And these are very good leads once you fix them. I have a bunch of them. You know, this one isn't fixed. I'm going to use the set that I did repair already. They're stackable, so you could plug into the back of them. And that's all. So, but your first leads, I have other ones. Martin Lawrence, I like his leads better. They're not stackable. So if that was my first lead, I wouldn't be able to add anything. So what I usually do is use a Handtech that I repaired first. So if I want to piggyback a ground, you know, I have the stackable jack air. But the main thing is just, you know, run your hand both ways, because you're going to find that on every Handtech lead I ever had so far. I think this is the last of the Mohicans. This is the only one I didn't repair yet out of like 8. But all right, guys, now I'm going to get on that coil. All right, first thing I'm going to do is calibrate. But one thing I want to show you, like these are things to pay attention to if you're considering these two scopes, is the scaling on your amp clamps. This is an AES Wave. It got a 20 amp scale and the 60 amp scale. Now on HScope, there are presets. Somebody has already made one for this. I'll show you how to get that. On the MicSig VATO, we're going to need this conversion rate because they don't have a preset for a certain clamp. But on HScope, people like Dennis Martin, I mean, the whole community, they make presets for common, you know, because we're not going with one brand. We're using different equipment with these scopes. It's not like a master kit. So some probes you do have to make your own scale for. And one thing that's nice about HScope and where it's going to shine over the MicSig is what the community has done to make these. Thanks, guys, because that's where I got mine. Okay, this is how we're set up, just nice and simple. And I like keeping the leads out of the way, getting, because the fuel injectors are right there, so they can pick up some interference from that coil. So try to keep them as far away as possible, and then I just get them up in the air, get them away from any motors, anything electrical that's going to be running while you're doing your test, especially on the ignition. Like I have a 20 times attenuator going to the primary, and then I just have the AES Wave, the low amp clamp. It's on the 20 amp scale. Now, it's a lot easier in here. That's one of the things that's really cool about HScope is I can just go to the screen recorder and show you how you could get the preset for almost any amp clamp there is, or make your own. Guys, it's open on oscilloscope mode, but just wanted to show you where the calibration, how easy it is. You just go to the settings, hit the calibration, then you short out your leads and hit the calibrate 0 level. I already did that, but I just wanted to show you because that's going to be one of the differences too between this and the MicSig. It's not a big one, but it is a difference. And I'm going to want to go to the Automotive module. And this is where, on channel 1, that's where I have the primary ignition. Now we're going to keep that there, but we're going to change this to times 20. Oh, that's 20 amp. And then that lets it know we have the attenuator on it. On channel 2, I'm going to hit probe, and somebody already made the AES Wave ones. That'd be the AES Wave, the 20 amp scale. So that's going to put us right where we need to be on the scale wise. The amplitude, 16, but we'll start there. That's what I mean. There's no wrong place to start. You're better off overshooting a little if you have to, because I think we're getting a little over 600 volts out of it last time. And the sampling rate, I'm going to keep down. I'm going to go to 300. That would be the last one with 2 channels. You could get 600 kilosample on 1 channel, and it divides if you use 2. So we're going to go to the highest resolution. This will enable page modes, the white. We don't want to do that for this test. That's for longer periods of time, and it'll actually take several pages. So you could go back and look at whole screens. But we're going to go to the highest on non-page mode. And like I think Pete Mayer from Motor Age, like he has a 20-20 rule, 20 volt, 20 milliseconds. We're going to start with his 20 part on here. The volt were pretty close, so thank you, Pete. Now I'm going to just start it, and then I'm going to run the car, but I'm going to want to calibrate the amp clamp first. And that would be on a green channel right here. I'm going to hit the button on this one. Some of them have a wheel. This one has a button that you just hit. We should see something moving in there a little bit. I was waiting, it'll find it 0. Why is it reading negative? No, we're not moving yet. With the engine not even on, I wouldn't expect any voltage on there, so we're going to 0 that out. We'll put as much time, and this is what's nice, to pinch the zoom. You could you could change a couple of the things that the zoom and get you, but we went down to 1 millisecond. We're going to go back up to 20. Just repeat. All right, we'll see what she does. Okay, what are we seeing, if anything? Like, do a stop and then zoom in on what we see. It's a little blocky now, but there's no filter on anything yet. But we could see the ignition waveform, we could see the current ramp. And that's just first try, not shutting the scope off, not shutting the camera off, not shutting the screen recorder off. That's first turn of the key with a very easy setup. It's not a preset setup, but you could see how easy we got the probes and how we got a signal. Now with the amperage, definitely. Let me just show you, sometimes you don't need all the resolution. If we say 150, sometimes these look pretty good at 150. You see the difference. We were actually getting a little bit too much resolution for doing the quick analysis. If you wanted to make a capture, like especially on the cam crank correlation, or if you're really getting into the ignition, you're going to want to see, you know, a little bit more definition. But just for finding a misfire, I mean, this is pretty good, you know, detail for just turning the key and, you know, see what the scope got you. Well, that's just to pinch the zoom, how you can move around on it. It kind of leaves a lot of things customizable, so you can make them You can make HScope like how you like it. Like I have the purple and green on. Next week I might change them. That's another thing that I haven't found on the MicSig, the way to change the screen from black. It might be possible, but you see, we could go up here. We could take 6 minutes and 24 seconds at this sample rate. But let me shut it off a second. We'll see what we have. Well, actually, let me give it a rev first while it's still recording. See, that's what was catching my eye earlier, was like the D cell. The way the ignition looks and the way the spark was going. I mean, that's why it's so important that you actually, I mean, I could have changed the name there. I actually should have, but yeah, it just seems like a little bit waste of your time watching me change the name of a file. But the scope teaches you, so I can't stress enough to just actually getting one in, going out there and getting things in for a starter scope, or, you know, on a budget, even if it's not your main scope. These HS series, they're very budget friendly. And see, this is on the rev. This is what you could almost tell the way the spark breaks up here. Well, not really breaking up, just the way the spark is affected by the D cell. These are very characteristic of that. Whenever we're at idle, let me find a good idle one here. Or anyone, they're all pretty good images. I was pretty happy with this whole. And you could shrink your time down a little too. Makes it easier to find. See, this is at idle. See how nice and, you know, curved this burn line is? And it still has lean uptick at the end. We can see the coil oscillations. And we also have the current ramp. How much detail can we get even without a filter? There it was starting to get liney, but here we could see, if you move it out of the way, we could still see the oscillations at the beginning of the current ramp. So, I mean, that's a really good view for ignition and being that simple and easy once you have it hooked on to. This is a very easy coil to get to, you know, no doubt, but this is when I like picking up on my time of, if I seen something like this, we always see this on the D cell, it seems, but right here, that would have still been on acceleration. Look at the spark. Because we could see down here we're building up. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's a good waveform. It's just a condition that the engine's under while this is occurring. But what's caught my eye as interesting is some of the, like here we know it's coming out of a hard rev. And see how the spark line looks. Quite different. Just out of curiosity, anything that you find on the screen you want to measure, this is how you drop your cursors on HScope. Yes. hit vertical or horizontal, and you could, like say on this one, we're going after the current ramp down here. It's green, the green scale's over here, so we're 16 amps. So we were pretty good going for the 20 amp scale. That one was right on. And this is with a 20 times attenuator, and we're still getting excellent detail. Now the measurement, yeah, for a 20 times, see, it looked different the other day. It looked like it was a higher spike, but actually, if we move the cursor up to the top of that guy, 247 volt. All right. A little bit lower than I thought. We see it idle. But that's only one firing event too. Sometimes these will capture the higher resolution you're on. Sometimes you see more trails. But we could see the flicker when you move it. But that would be very good for finding a misfire. And then this is, you seen how I did save it. That would be, because this is another point that I'd like to bring out before I moved on. That's all you do to save. You change the name of it here, you change it to whatever you want, and it'll save the file. And I already saved this once, but if anything you wanted to load, that you took this image, like even if you disconnected HScope and you took this into your house, you know, if you're sitting around the garage, or if you want to review something that you already captured, as soon as it's done saving, I'll show you that. Okay, you hit this, the clock with the backwards arrow, and these are all your waveforms. Like if you wanted to look at something, anything, we'll just say this, a gym starter. And it pulls it right up. Actually, that was Ronnie's. And this is something, guys, this is a lesson here. That's what I was saying earlier. I did like 7 starters in the past, well then it was in 10 days. So every one of them I used the scope on, and I mean the scope was teaching me, you know, I wasn't using that. This is just, you know, an example of some things you see by actually hooking up. Look at the solenoid here, what's happening. But not to go into that too far, but this is an example. This is all starter. That's not a compression issue on an RC test. That's an RC test, but that's all starter. But anyways, that's how you load the waveform up. Okay, next I'm going to move on. The secondary, I mean, this is really good. Secondary, a lot of times, I mean, it looks nicer, but I mean, this is so good that I'm not sure if I was going for a misfire, I'd need secondary also. But just for the sake of that paddle probe, I'm going to take off the primary and just keep the current probe and use the hand tech. I think it's the HT25. It's a paddle probe and it should pick up a signal. But we're going to see what it looks like and, you know, compare it to what we got off the primary. All right, I plugged in. This is the hand tech. This would be the HT25. It's a COP paddle, but this is also hand tech HT25. And this is the one that goes around the spark plug wire, so it uses the same scale. And that's going to be the same thing as we did. To switch this one, see, somebody already made a preset for the HT25. So when I turn that on, it's already set up on its scale. Now I'm going to start the car, and I'm going to use the probe. It would still be better on screen recorder, but this is basically all you do with them. I mean, this is fairly cheap. You could make these, but you push them like that. This hand tech does bend. Like if you had to get under this with a rigid one, it's a little bit hard, but you could stay back like this and still get a secondary waveform. Real easy when trying to find a misfire. If you know you got a misfire, just touching the coils. But this, sometimes it does knock HScope offline. The newer, the 512 Maxes, they're supposed to be more resistant to that. But I have one of the newer cords. I ordered a spare cord, and I noticed it does say EMI rejection on the cord or shielding. So maybe it'll help keep a little off of there. Alright guys, I'm doing both the screen recorder and I want to show you what I'm holding on the car. We hit start, get her going, and then with the power probe, we just hold it over like that. We should be seeing the bottom filling up. Okay, let me stop that and we'll stop the car, see what we have. Alright guys, I'm doing both the screen recorder and I want to show you what I'm holding on the car. We hit start, get her going, and then with the paddle probe, we're going to just hold it over like that. We should be seeing the bottom filling up. Okay, let me stop that and we'll stop the car, see what we have. Hey guys, sorry about the noise. I got the exhaust fan on. I turned it on to get them fumes out of here. Better than open the door sometimes. But you could see you got good, you got enough for a fast test like that. The only problem would be is if you wanted to see that on that snap throttle, you'd have to have somebody snap it. If you don't have, like on this car, there's no throttle cable. So you'd have to have somebody actually, snap it or set it and rig it up somehow, but I'd go a different route than that. I do have ones coming from Rotkee, the kind that you just use a piece of double-sided tape and put over the coil. I want to see how they look for secondary, and that would be easy. You could do your own revs there, and, well, I really zoomed in. But what's nice is the eyeball. It usually takes you back to home. It took me right back to where I was. There we go. A little bit of pinching and zooming, but I kind of like that better than having all the complex, having to change scales. Even though it's not hard on some scopes and you do get accustomed to it, it's just nice, how quickly that was blown up in my face and how back I got back to just one firing event. They're only 2-wire coils, but they are pretty insulated to not be seeing that high of a firing line there. But we're still seeing, the ignition event. This is where there would have been a coil spike, but we're coming back down. I don't believe I had the scale off on that. It's just all it's picking up. We can see the oscillations really nice. You can see the burn line there very nice. If you wanted to measure your burn line, or your burn time rather, you'd just move this over and then drop another one. So 1.3 milliseconds, that would be perfect. You got good measurement just with a quick paddle probe. And usually on paddle probes, they're really nice. Like if you feel a miss and you're not getting code, you just go around to the coils. You just tap each one, take a look at them. One of them's going to look different. You're not even looking for to analyze it at that point. You're just looking to find one. And what's nice on HScope when you're done with the cursor is flick them off the screen. It's very easy to use. That's why I'm saying if it's your first scope or if you're just learning how to use these, you're a lot better off being able to see the waveform you got. Then you could take your measurements, you could see where you're at, and that's going to help you in the future. But the main thing is you don't want to get frustrated straight off. That's why it's easy checking these known goods. That's why the more of these you check, the easier you're going to be able to spot a bad one. So nothing's a waste of time. Using an oscilloscope on a known good is never a waste of time. I guarantee you that scope is going to teach you something. Okay guys, I think this is working out better. Just like instead of having a plan of what I'm going to try to explain is just do it as I go, what's happening. Now, as I do this, you've seen the image with that hand tech with the coil over plug paddle. And this is one thing that, like I keep talking about these starters, I am going to share them in a different video. It's probably not going to be in on because it was just, you know, too out of whack to actually make something out of. But it showed me my amp clamp was bad, and it was not my high amp clamp. It was an AES Wave. It was a 600 amp clamp. Now I got a hand tech to replace it. The readings are very close together. It's more accurate. The AES Wave was only off on its actual scale. You know, the most important thing, it was off on. So I got a hand tech to replace it that's closer to the actual amperage, but the AES Wave, I mean, the definition of the picture of the waveform is a lot better. So your accessories do make a big difference. I was just under the assumption they were rebranded hand techs. You know, you hear that a lot. But I do have, I saved the screen captures of that just on an amp clamp, you know, the difference. So on secondary, that hand tech's a pretty cheap secondary. And what I've been doing is I've been mixing a lot of snap-on accessories from an old Modus. And the one I really liked is one I used on the last video, the MicSig. It's a burn line analyzer. And we're not getting much of a primary spike or a secondary spike with this probe. But on a primary, we've seen that spike really good. So, you know, it depends what you're looking for. If you're looking for coil output, or if you're trying to find a misfire, would be the way you go with that. Now, if you really want to analyze the ignition, that's why, and it's kind of weird. The Snap-on has an RCA plug. I got an adapter to turn it into a BNC cable, and it works pretty good. So I'm going to just show you the difference when you see things like that. Don't always think that that's the highest capability of your scope. The accessories do make a difference. Yet the better the accessory, you know, the better your scope will work. Here's the Snap-on coilover plug. It's a COP11. Well, you could see for burn time measurement only. See instructions. I have no instructions, but I do have an RCA adapter. It goes into a BNC, and this is what I use. I do use the Modus leads, and it does seem to have a slightly better image, but I think that's just mainly noise from the non-insulated connector. I'm going to hook that up, and I'm going to show you with the current ramp, and then I'll put all 600 kilobytes a second, or kilosamples a second, into the secondary, and see if we could get any more detail just over a coil over plug. Okay guys, this is just on oscilloscope mode, so we're only getting one screen. And I have it on a normal trigger, and I got the trigger levels pretty low. I'd bring it up a little bit, but we could see we're cutting the top off on the scale. Okay, we'll go with 32. Shouldn't be overscaling anymore. I'm not sure the scaling of this Snap-on accessory. And like it says, it's for burn time only, so I wouldn't go with this KV anyways. It's just nice to know where that spike is, but look at the detail on that burn line. I mean, that is incredible. And Y channel 2 did not reappear. Sometimes it is there. There it is. We actually put in one and now automotive module, we could see multiple ones, but this is just a live. If you're looking for a live misfire and you can't see that burn line, I mean, we seen something happen right there. We also heard something in the engine click too, so it took a little bit more demand. If we were actually going after a misfire code, I mean, you're live watching a misfire, but you have no more memory than this. So, I mean, you could screen record this part, but that's basically what the automotive module's for. I mean, you can see the detail in it. The burn lines are incredible. Now the fan just kicked on. You've seen that burn time go longer with the fan on. Trigger lower. See, things like that, you keep seeing them. You see how the burn line, the spark line, the burn line here, not spark line, the burn line. Its distance is increasing, probably the engine giving it more fuel at idle whenever that fan kicks on to keep the RPMs up. The IAC gives a little bit more air, computer gives a little more fuel. You see suddenly, I hope that's picking up on your end whenever we hear the clutch for the AC click too, how we see this burn line change. Pretty good observations. I mean, we're not tracking down a problem, but, you know, now this would be nice to have whenever I do put new plugs in this for air. It's, you know, I don't believe these ones are that old, but it's still, you could go back and see the difference that, you know, your new plugs made or your new wires. I mean, pretty decent. I like a snap-on accessory. Now we're going to put it on the automotive module. Start up, start the car, and then I'm going to give it a couple snaps. Alright, let me stop it. So we could have went for 6 minutes and 24 seconds. Seeing a lot of noise on that amp clamp. Oh no, we ain't. There we go. It looks like it did. I either underscaled it or it's a limited, current limited. But we could see even for secondary, the secondary is almost as detailed as the primary was with this snap-on accessory. With the hand tech, I mean, we were better off on the primary side. This would be into the rev. If I could find one here on the bottom, this is what was catching my eye on the D-cell. Not that there's anything wrong or specific I'm looking for. It's just the way the ignition looks whenever we get these big, chunky in the middle here, like how it gets big, and it's more on the whenever you're coming off of the snap. Like down here, we'll just be coming in the one here. We could see it's burning pretty straight across. A little dip from the turbulence, but this is what you're seeing in there. No two would look the same because every time that, you know, fuel compression and air all put together, it's not a very happy environment, so we don't see the same things. But this is on down here. If we look on the bottom, we could line it up with D cells. take that, you could see more than one event happening on the same screen. We're getting 1, 2, 3, 4. I just like the, I don't know, the image of that, the snap on it does give you a very good image. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to just put it on one channel with that snap-on accessory. We're going to shut off the current channel. I'm going to take the sample rate the whole way to 600. Start it again, do the same thing. Go back to Pete's 2020 rule. Start, let her rip. Okay, we'll stop you. And I could see down here we did get everything on there. Now this will be the full 600 kilosamples a second. As you can see, we get a little blocky, but that would be the difference in how many samples you have going on at the same time. Now, will low pass help us? Absolutely not. You sometimes higher resolution, I mean, you're seeing a lot more, but on 150 that spark line looks a lot better. But this, I mean, before it gets to dots, look how far in we are. That's just part of the burn line filling the whole screen. Okay guys, I have a compression gauge in the cylinder. Now this is when you start asking yourself questions and then going out and spending time trying to find the answers. That's what, you know, that's where you're, you know, the scope is taking you directions on its own. But right now, every time I use the pressure transducer, there is always a difference between the readings on transducer compared to manual compression gauge. And a lot of that is that the foot valve in the compression gauge, it just lets it keep building pressure, and the transducer, it doesn't hold the pressure. So knowing that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to move the camera, I'm going to record the compression gauge, because I'm going to have to go back and review it. And look, what I'm seeing, what I want to see is the first puff. That's what we're going to be seeing on scope almost every time. But if the first puff, like, you know, the first time that needle jumps, I want to see where it's at, and you know, just see where it moves and see if we could compare it to the scope and try to get to some kind of, you know, compromise. I believe it was off 30 pounds or 30 psi. So was it off 30 psi because of it's allowed to build pressure? but we're going to see if we could, because you always want to go even for an RC test. If you check one cylinder, you know what your compression is going to be across the board. But it all requires a compression gauge to back up your scope. Because as of this point, I would not be confident with the scope saying, you know, comparing it with factory spec for compression. You know, 30 points is a lot. All right, guys, hopefully it stays right there. Keep an eye on that first pump. I hope this has clear flow. Hallelujah. How about 170? All right. Now the first pump is what I'm going to be looking. I'm going to look on the camera back to and see. Okay, guys. Before I get into this transducer, there's one thing I got to point out, that when you get your own scope, or if you already have them, don't always go off of videos. I mean, you know, by all rights, don't go off of me, because I'm not here to teach you anything. I mean, we're here so scope could teach us all something. I mean, that's all. You know, if you like using this equipment, if you're looking at it, if you're interested in it, that's mainly what I'm about. But I'm about answering my own questions, and it's just, you're going to have these same questions. I mean, if this helps you out, that's great. But one thing, when you hear one thing, it's only one way, like somebody believes that only one way is the, and you see conflicting videos from, you know, for example, Eugene at Rotkee, his videos, they're in Ukrainian, but you could watch the subtitles, and he makes the most solid pipes, the most rigid pipes, these things here. These are to go into the spark plug hole, and then you put the pressure transducer on it. Now I modified mine with a high volume quick disconnect and everything, and you know, so you do all this stuff and then you really wonder why. But before you buy this transducer, I mean, you do a lot. Everybody says the hoses are junk. Everybody says the adapters are junk. They're not this high quality, but you know, you're going to be able to use them for a while. Yeah, they're not. Here, let me get one for example. Like this is their quick connect. The hose is pretty solid. It's these crimp type. Now, if you do have to use a hose, now this is Eugene's alternative. This, right on it, it's probably upside down now, but I believe it is. But if not, you'll see it both ways. This says right on it, brake line. This is a brake line. So that's what he's using. You know, it's not much more rigid than this, but it's shorter, and it has heavier duty brass ends on it. The straight pipe that you get with this is aluminum. And then you put your adapter on the end. These are shorter. And Eugene is adamant about the shorter and the more rigid, the better. But, and it's a big but, it's the better. It doesn't mean you're not going to get anything with this. It doesn't mean you're not going to get anything with this. That they look good. That I wasn't leaking any air. If you do, there's O-rings on the end of these. Put an injector ring on it, you know, give it a little bit more rubber to seal or something. But I mean, you will be able to use this kit. I upgraded mine, you know, without any failure, but just based on a lot of reviews, you know, and it's like, yeah, but is it usable? Absolutely it is. You know, it's, especially if you're using it for, like, you know, a specific problem once or something, you definitely, you know, you might get, you know, 30, 40 uses out of this thing before it even leaks. I don't know. I've used it probably 10 times, like what comes with it. I've had no leaks. But the thing is that these are very good. These are, you know, I like that. But if you look at, just what I was talking about earlier, Motor Age, Pete Mayer, he uses, I hope I'm saying that right, it might be Meyer, but the way I pronounce it, it's Mayer. But anyways, when he's using a pressure transducer, I believe it's Automotive specialty scope or something. It's a very nice laptop scope. His transducers, it was attached with a piece of, it looks like that exercise or physical therapy, that rubber they give you to stretch with. I mean, it was just laying on the intake, flopping around. Now, he got a beautiful waveform with it. Darren on Mechanic Mindset, I believe it was on the Rotkee pulse sensor or maybe one of their ignition pickups he was doing a review on. He was using a pulse sensor. It looked like it was a rubber straw flopping all over the place. So, you know, it's like, you still get very usable waveforms. You want to keep it as short and rigid as possible, but don't let all the bad reviews scare you on that. You'll get some use out of this, but I'm going to see, you know, which scope is closer to that gauge. I'm hoping they both are, but I don't know, or at least I hope one is. Here's what you get with, this is the JH APT 100. I'll leave a link in the comments. I'll leave as many links as I could remember to actually leave for you guys, especially if it's something odd like these. But this kit came with everything except these and this and this. This end I changed over because that hose that comes with it, it's not one of our standard 1/4-inch quick connects. So I wanted to go to more standard ones so I could use this with more things, just using airline nozzles like this. So, but what you get with this, that will still plug in, everything will work, and the images do look good. You know, there's no denying that. But I kind of like it this way for the speed too, and it's good if you can. These are pretty cheap. Everything on Rotkee is very reasonable. I always got to order on the way. You'll find something, I guarantee it. Okay guys, even stacked, this is a little bit too short, so I'm going to go with the Rotkee, the flexible pressure transducer hose. I think, if I can recall, this was like 16 bucks, something like that. But not bad at all. Okay guys, that's the setup going in. I'm going to go in on, we're sinking still. I didn't remove the back probe from the first time we did the primary ignition. It's still in there, and I got the gap set. I put it on like a 1.5 kilovolt because I think we're seeing around 1.25 on the scope, so make it jump a little bit because there's nothing else going on in there. See if we get a signal on it, but it's going to be in clear flood mode first. So I'm going to just do it just like we did the compression. Take a little look at, you know, see if anything makes sense. Okay guys, I'm going to 400 millisecond. I'm going to go give it a couple cracks. Pretty easy to find and zoom in on. That spark's firing in open air. I probably could increase that. And I mean, you could increase it, measure your burn time. I mean, see how far the spark's throwing, or how far the coil's throwing the spark. But what we're mainly after is we want to see, you know, when it occurs, it looks like it's happening after top dead center, at least in clear flood mode. But one thing, like I say, is I find things worth mentioning. Like, you see how faint this is on my screen. You could change up to 4 DPI, but even 3's even usable, especially for, you know, pressure analysis. We're not looking for very, very fine detail unless you're going to analyze your ignition while you're here. But still there, we're getting very, you know, basic. You'd definitely be able to tell if something was extremely wrong, you know, with your firing event there. But it does look a little bit better whenever you have the lines thicker if you're doing the end cylinder. And this you could follow along with so many different people on analysis of it. But like I say, guys, the main thing is being able to get it on the screen. Then you could get some help. You know, if you're just asking random questions, or if you have to sit through you know, a whole videos just looking for one part to answer your question, it's easier if you could just get an image, and then somebody could definitely help you. But I was just curious on the side here too. Now with the manual gauge, looking from the side, I'm going to have to look at that again, but it looked like it was pretty close to almost 100. Okay, this one must be 91 foot-pound for PSI, so yeah, it's pretty close to the first puff. I'm going to have to look at that again, see how close I could see on that gauge. But to the first puff that compression gauge took, that's pretty close, and that's what we see over and over again. On the compression gauge, it has that the pressure relief valve. It holds the pressure, so it could build pressure. This isn't building any pressure. That's how they work, and that's how close I wanted to see. Because if you look at a factory pressure spec, yeah, 91, that would be under. You're not going to want to trust this, comparing this spec to like a factory spec. If it was like, say, 130 PSI was your limit, and you're saying, you know, no, 91 on your scope, well, that's about right though. That's the first puff. The thing built like 165 PSI after that. So it's pretty neat to know, but that's one of the questions I had to answer for myself. I wanted to actually see that gauge and see right where I am here. So we got something taken care of there that I could kind of put to rest. All right, guys, next thing, I'm probably going to move on to the Mix Sig pretty soon, because I've never used the transducer on the Mix Sig, and I want to keep it there. Might add a couple channels or something. But right now, while it's on the subject, if you don't like your screen white, or if you don't like them colors, all that's customizable. Like if I wanted the back, oh, probably went right past it. You have brightness. I mean, you have a good bit of, you know, options. And the screen color, mine's on white. If you wanted yours on black, you know, you could change the color of, like, if you prefer the yellow. Sometimes I like the purple. It's a contrast with the black and with the green. But if you want like your traditional, you know, yellow on one, where I didn't stick it. Then now channel 1's going to be yellow. So I mean, this is definitely one of the strong points. You know, you're going to be able to pick what you see and how you see it. And whenever you're comparing specs on scopes and everything, that's what I mean. That's what I got to remind you. This is, I only took this at 150 kilosamples a second. Now you can go up to 300 without even entering pages mode. And while I'm here, I may as well give it a shot. You know, that's what this is all about, seeing what makes difference. But this is a pretty low graphic test. I'm not sure how much resolution does you good on it, because we're looking at differences in pressure, looking at valves opening and closing. So I'll wait a second too, because I always see it in the buffer coming by a little bit later if I have the sample rate high. Well, we were still at 300, I'm sorry. Okay guys, I moved the resolution up to 300. Okay, start her up. Not actually start, that's next. Alright, see the screen's still filling up down here a little. I usually wait a little bit before I hit stop. Just make sure you got everything captured now. Alright, I see some action there. Yeah, the resolution does help. I mean, it's getting more, I don't want to call them pixels, but it's getting more sample points. But they are a little bit blocky, and it's, I don't think there's anything in there you might be, that you'd be looking at that close. But you can see some pretty cool, and this is unfiltered too. On HScope, or any scope really, but with HScope I'm getting really comfortable with. If I put a low pass filter on, and all it does is clean it up without dropping. So I put a cursor first. Right here is where my peak is. So if I put on a low pass filter, and we could see it didn't knock my top off at all. So we're still at the same amplitude, so we're going to go, or voltage, so we're going to go stay with that. You get a little more detail with the low pass on, but it's very, very nice. And for actually watching, like, you could put, if you wanted to see the ignition bigger, you could shrink the size of this and then invert the whole waveform. Now, that's on the maximum resolution there. But see, that's what I mean. It turns a little bit blocky. I like it on 150. I mean, I'm not looking for something that I need that much resolution. But we can almost see that on any of them that firing event is happening after top dead center. We could still line that up with the firing line. Then we could see it, as you could actually measure it, but this we could see with our eye. But it's just moving air right now. There's definitely enough definition for the valve overlap. And HScope does, I mean, they both come with their own set of features, and I could show you that one while I'm, the phase rollers you can pull out, and you just get 2 peaks on the screen. And just line them up at the top of both peaks. So this way, if you're looking for, like, if exhaust was getting into any place where it shouldn't, you could tell which cylinder's on exhaust. see we have number 1, it would be on expansion. And then here would be the velvet overlap going into the exhaust. And then the intake, we're not seeing anything going on around here because the pressure is the same. It's not running, so it's just sucking in atmospheric air, and we're not really changing pressure. And then you line the other end up with the next peak. So if you were getting, I'll say you were getting compression into the intake, you knew, you could tell which cylinder was on the expansion, because number 1's going to go expansion, exhaust, intake, compression. Then cylinder number 2, if that's your firing order, 1, 2, 3, 4, that's what you put in here. It asks you whenever you open up the phase rollers, if you hit the settings button, it'll ask you the firing order, so you could put in, but this is just assuming 1, 2, 3, 4. So at the same time, number 1 is on expansion, number 4 is on exhaust. So if for some reason you were getting, like, who's on compression at this time? Compression's the shade of brown. Number 2's on compression right now. So if you were getting, compression coming out of the exhaust somehow, you know what, or into the intake, it's who's open at the same time. Like here, compression and exhaust is going to be your pushing force. So you have dark brown and the tan. So if you're pushing compression or exhaust into the intake, who's on what? Kind of like who's on first, the exhaust and the compression, number 4 and number 2. If you're getting that into your intake, could be coming from number 3. Well, not necessarily, but you could tell which one it could be coming from. You'd have to dig a little bit deeper once you got there, but these come with the automotive license with HScope. You get a lot of features in there. Has a cylinder identifier too, and then the same with these. Whenever you don't want them, you just flick them off the screen with your finger. It makes setting them up real easy. This would be more like for firing. If you were looking at ignition, especially all the cylinders at once, you could put on the cylinder identifiers. And these will tell you what cylinder. In the same place, like I was saying, this gear wheel here, it asks you your firing order. So you could change it all. If it's a V8, put down 8, and it'll change all the numbers up top. So you could identify which cylinder. Right now, that's not doing us no good. We're in one cylinder, but it's the same place to adjust them both. Same thing if you don't want them no more, so your finger, flick them off. Very easy to set up, very easy to get an image on the screen. Now I'm going to try this, let it run for a little bit with that one plug out. I'll get a little bit of voltage back in the battery anyways, and we'll see what this looks like running. I'm going to save it, and then I'm going to set that up and give her a shot. Okay guys, I'm going to let it run now. All the settings are still the same. See right there, we got knocked off the screen. All my settings left, and it stopped recording. Okay, nothing's very close to each other, but we do have the spark occurring right by the back probe. There's nothing we could do about that. I'm going to give it one more shot, see if it records it running. Okay guys, since it knocked me off, I have to change everything back to what I was using. I have to go back to times 20. Okay, now I should be set up. I'm going to try it one more time. I mean, absolutely nothing has moved since we were just doing this. So we're going to hit run. It happens sometimes with Android. I notice on the MicSig software, sometimes it'll knock itself right off as soon as you boot it up, but after that it seems to stay on pretty good. It didn't blow us off yet. Okay, I see events in the buffer. It's like I say, it happens sometimes, but I know whenever I'm dealing with ignition, like I'm going to try to get a snap in it, but before I do that, I'm going to stop this and save it so I don't lose the waveform if that happens again whenever I snap it. Just a little precaution, because I see the timing is moved to before top dead center right in here. That's good. I mean, it must just be whenever you're in clear flood mode, it doesn't adjust the timing. So I'm going to hit record again. Let it go. I'm going to get it. Snap through it. I'll take it easy on it. Alright, if it stayed on, that would be great. Nope, it blew us off, but we do have this part of the waveform until it happened anyway. I don't know if you guys seen anything on the screen or, but that's with the 512 Max. They're supposed to be a lot better with that, with the EMI interference. It's just HScope don't like it, but I thought maybe that cord was making the difference on it. Type C cable, it's the EMI rejection one, but didn't seem to help on that. That's pretty decent. We could see what happened up until it. Now see, when I'm pinching, it's not zooming on me. But what I do a lot of times, I'll just save the waveform. Then if we wanted to see a same one, just reopen it. It's still not letting me pinch it. Okay, guys, what I'm going to do, so I'm going to shut off everything here. Reopen HScope. Go to the auto module. Then I'm going to recall it. And that's at the worst, what you have to do is just shut off. And it seems like after it takes a shock like that, I mean, that wasn't over voltage or anything like that. That's just, from what I understand, that's the electromagnetic interference interacting with Android. Now that should be the case with because we're going to be using the Mix Sig with Android too. So we'll see if it knocks it offline, see what happens. It's all about exploration, and right now we see this move to back before top dead center. Now you could get your degrees off of it too. I mean, you could figure all that out with you have degree rulers. Well, these are cylinder identifiers. But it's that same thing. You could get rid of these same way. You just flick them out of your way when you're done with them. There we have the phase rulers again. That's, I mean, they're very handy. Now here we want to be with TDC. You put it in the middle of the compression hump, which, you know, is easier to get zoomed out. That's one of the nice things I like about HScope. Bigs are not looking for nothing here. I already explained these, but how quick you could just change what you're looking at. If you were looking at the big picture, you seen something out of whack, you know, you're pretty fast to be able to zoom in, and you get enough. Like I was telling you a minute ago, like you get enough to see like what does this hump right here, a couple of the videos I've seen, if this really changes on you, that your valve's not seating right all the time. And these look pretty even. I mean, there's so many things you could go into with the in-cylinder pressure analysis, but what's nice about HScope is anytime, just like I brought this waveform up, I could be watching the video, say if I'm watching on my laptop, I could recall this waveform and I could be doing, but see when it did that, it also did knock us off. No, we're still in PSI, never mind. How far down this dip goes, how even it goes, it all means a little bit of something. And this, I'm not sure of. I haven't heard much about this. This, I know if you see an event like this, or if you see a bigger one here and it changes, your valve's not seating the same the whole way. This could just be a little bit of overlap. I'm not sure, but that's what's nice. Later on, I could look. And, you know, I have this waveform right with me, very easy. I could zoom in on one, I could zoom in on several. I could zoom in on, but see, it knocked the rev off, the acceleration. We didn't get that. It seems like as soon as I accelerated, I don't know, you guys heard that, but or seen what was actually happening, but it's pretty neat, pretty decent detail. You could see all the firing events. Now we're going to move on. I'm going to put the MicSig up next. Pretty much same setup. I want to see if it gets knocked off and see what the pressure transducer looks like on it. And I'll show you the little difference on how you have to set it up for the MicSig. But all right, pretty good. And you can see there's all the wires are pretty much out of the way of everything. They're not on top of each other. But the one thing that seems to be setting everything goes off is whenever you're doing any kind of ignition and you actually have that spark in the air. This has a little plastic cover over it, but it's not shielded, you know, so even the whole way back here at the tablet, you're taking you know, there in the air, there's the electromagnetic interference, so it's interfering with our communication a little bit. I thought the improved cord might help some. It did, you know, I mean, but I guess you could unplug the coil if you were like, you know, hell bent on just doing the pressure, maybe see if that knocks it off or not. But, you know, that's why I wanted another scope to complement this scope. So, you know, if one has a strong point on, you use it for that. If one has a weak point on, you use it for that. HScope, I'm very happy with the detail, the ease of the setup, being able to customize or recall waveforms. I mean, you have a lot. And, honestly, if you're following along with, say, like Scanner Danner, like at Mechanic Mindset, Pine Hollow, you know, so Eric O at South Main, if you're following along with any of them, HScope will let you get right in there. And, you know, even though they're on a Pico, you could still do your measurements. You could still do your setup and you could follow along, but you only got the 2 channels now. But, I mean, it's going to teach you a lot. All right, guys, I figured I'd drop a cursor before I close this out, too. This was showing running 304 PSI, but that's before we got knocked off. I'm not sure what the running PSI is supposed to be, but this would be one of them things where the transducer, it's occurring so fast that it is building some pressure. The other cylinders, they're just carrying it along at a much higher speed than cranking, so we are building pressure even though we're not firing in this cylinder. So I could look into that and see if that's even realistic, but we know it was pretty close. You know, on idle, just getting the basic, or on cranking, it was getting pretty close to what the gauge was showing us. So, you know, hopefully that number stays the same when I do some digging up. But now I could save that waveform and I have that, I look at up later on, you know, so because you're not going to have the car hooked up later on, but you are going to have the waveform. HScope makes that very easy. All right, have the MicSig plugged in, and the first thing you notice with this is as soon as you turn the button on, it'll actually fire up the software. And this is the part sometimes it closes right away, just fire it up again. It always wants access to the easy USB. But one thing with the MicSig, before you go to use it, you do have to calibrate it. And this is a lot, well, not a lot longer, but I mean, it could take up to 5 minutes to self-calibrate. You do it with no probes attached. Let's go self-adjust and click OK. And it'll do this for a while. The box will make some funky sounds, and then it'll say up there where the self-adjust is running, it'll say ready. So it's a little bit different to calibrate, but not bad. You know, it's just a different way. You're not shorting out the probe to find zero. Okay, guys, this is one of the small drawbacks about the MicSig. Is the only thing I changed is the actual scope. I kept the leads, kept everything there, but the attenuator, the MicSig, it could take a constant 300 volt. So that's a little bit under where we were seeing yesterday. But with the ×4 attenuator, that's the smallest I have, which would be great. But there's no scale for ×4, and you can't make your own. So the closest thing I have, even a 2x would have been good, but I don't have one. I don't have a 5x. I do have a 10x. So that's what I'm going to go with. I'm going to put on the AT10 and then let it know that's what I'm using. But that's what I'm going to have to use for the primary voltage, when I could have used the ×2 and been all right. So I'm going to have to look on eBay, see how available these are. I'm going to start it up, see if we get a signal. All right. We could still see it's confirming that it still is firing a little bit before top dead center. That's what we like. You know, whenever I was doing it in clear flood mode and we were seeing after top dead center, that was a little bit, you know, weird, but I mean, now we see. You could go in as far as you want and actually check the degrees. You could check, you could see as high here. We're getting up to almost 500 volts, so it's good to have some kind of attenuator on there. A ×2, that would have been fine. That would have took me up to like a 600 volt operating range. Now you could see fairly decent detail. It's not as easy as the pinch to zoom, but I mean, you can get in on, you can move the trigger here. Anywhere you move this bar, you're moving the trigger. So that's pretty cool. You could trigger off any channel you want that you see on the screen. You could just go for it. But this is kind of just zooming in on the ignition. We're going a little out of it. But I mean, you definitely could see a misfire if it was going on. You know, this thing's firing in the open, you know, into a spark tester, so we have a very ugly burn line. You can see the oscillations, all the energy that coil has left, so I could increase the gap to be a little bit if I wanted to see anything on there. This button here will always get you back to 0 for any channel. Now we're way into the milliseconds. I want to go back up to see the pressure. Down here will take you, this is 1 kilosecond a division. So you're seeing, we're not even seeing the first sliver yet. If you wanted to zoom into that. Doing the in-cylinder, I mean, there's not too many times you're going to want this much time. This would be looking for a very, very slow, rarely occurring signal, because you see we have one line here. What you can do, I'll quickly show you. I don't want to leave it running too long with the 1 cylinder. But you could bring your line over here. You could actually zoom in to what you have here. And then you even have a more zoom. So all in all, I mean, it's a pretty impressive scope. I mean, it gets you a lot of time on the screen, that's for damn sure. Well, let me give it a couple revs. I'm going to start it, stop it, let it run. But I do want to take this back down to 20. I'm going to give it a couple revs and we're going to see what kind of we can zoom into on 20 seconds. All right, see, we could have put a lot more for that little bit. We could have got more, but this is part of the idea. I want to show you what you could do with just the little waveform. If you were looking here on the revs, and you were looking specifically for what either was doing, from afar, you could zoom in like this. What you see up here, what I'm moving in the top window, that's your whole screen. So every time you move that, if you have this centered on there, we have all of this on the screen. Now, if your waveform was that long, you know, you can move into this section that you see. Like if you seen that dip there, you know that's a rev. You can move that and then you could further zoom this way. Even once you're in zoom, you could still control the time base. And you still have your timing mark. If you wanted to check your ignition timing, you could check it there. It's a pretty decent setup there. Oh, that was the one to get at. That looked worse, so we'll get rid of it. You could have a small sync like that if you want, whatever you want, whatever you're more comfortable in setting up and doing. I mean, if you click this, you have all your time scales. Like if you want to go back 20 millisecond, if you want to go, you know, 500 milliseconds, you could see that whole rev in there. You could zoom in further on that. It's kind of interesting how that, when you rev it on a dead cylinder, how you lose. Because if we're doing in, let's see what the top of that is whenever it goes through. You can put channel 2 at 0. Take off the zoom. And then just put the cursors up. About 145, 142. What's kind of interesting is down here, would be very low compression under the snow. Hey guys, I'm going to run it. I'm going to start the car up. Make sure my scales are still right. Definitely get one auto. Guys, I'm going to make sure got a low pass on there. See how I cleaned it up? Same with HScope. There were some little artifact lines in there. HScope cleaned them right up too. Not sure what they are. So I've used this a lot, and well, you know, probably 20 times at the most, but I won't call that a lot. But I rarely see artifacts like that in with pressure transducer. You see the ignition's back to before. This does have degree rulers. You pick your cylinders, your angle, you go 720, anything you want, anything in between. They drag over. Now this is actually moving, this isn't a capture. But you could see, you know, your different degrees, where your overlap's occurring, because you could put another cursor down on top of that still. You know, oops, sorry, wrong one. You can move these cursors to see, you know, right here would be the midpoint of the exhaust valve opening. Now you could look up, I'm not sure what it is, guys, that's what I'm saying. This is a way just to acquire waveforms. The research can be done later on at your leisure, but you're not always going to have the car, like, you know, in your living room. But we could see the ignition event, you could see where everything's occurring, and that gives you a lot of information. You could go for a lot longer time base if you wanted. But this is the zoom function I wanted to show you. I'm going to take these rulers off. This black box that's moving up top, that's your whole screen. Now, like I said, we're actually live. If we record this or stop it, we'd be able to see even more. Okay, we'll stop it. This is what we have in our buffer right now. If we zoom out, you see that's all we have. There's no more. If we want more, we move this up. Now, let me shut them cursors off while I'm at it. And then now we're running. You know, this is 10 seconds of division. I'm going to just skip a couple. Oh, right, almost not too hard. Shut it off. Just stop it. And you could instantly see where the rev was. If you wanted to zoom into just that part, like very fast, you're moving this up here, your waveform's already saved, so it moves very fast in live time. When it was running on a slight delay if you're trying to use the zoom live, but it just keeps recapturing your screen. This, we have everything in a buffer, so we could look at this as much as we want now. It's not going anywhere. But the zoom does seem to show a finer line, which is nice compared to the non-zoom line. If you just make this bigger to see how the line's a little bit thicker and fuller, but when you go to the zoom, it seems like it draws it like on HScope when it's only on 1 dpi, which is nice. Whenever you go back to the main menu and just make it bigger, it seems like it's 2 dpi, which is nice also. So it's pretty decent. You could measure with the cursors. It has cursors down here, horizontal, vertical, and it has your all measurements. This, you hit this button if you want to measure everything it's capable of measuring for either channel. When you click on the yellow, that's everything that was going on with the ignition. So you get a lot of information there. If you want anything else, like if you wanted the high, the amperage, phase, duty cycle, pulse width, I mean, you have a lot of things to add. You could add as many as you want, you could clear them. It's pretty quick to get around. You know, the sample rate, here's where I wanted to drive it up to 50 million points. It was on 2 million taking that sample. You could push the deep memory up to 50 million points, but you don't want to do it to sacrifice your sample rate. If you go too high on too many signals, you're going to drop down to, you know, your sample rate's going to be affected by your deep memory. But I'm going to shut that off and see if I can keep this on the 50 million. Well, 20 a channel. I'm going to start it and see if it changes the resolution that we're seeing. We're only on okay. Now the low pass went away. Turned it back on. This is on millivolts. It's about where you want that. Now this would be a little bit finer resolution up here, and especially for the deep memory. Like you could take longer captures. I'll do a couple revs and then I'm going to shut it off. Alright, Aaron, we don't want to hurt the charger too much. No, you see the size of that waveform. You could see from afar, again, where the rev is. You could zoom till you have that on your screen. Enhance. Move it to any part. Still see our timing mark. And just for reference, this is how much it will record. That whole waveform turned into just this line. And just on that line, if we zoom from that far away, we could still see some detail. So that's pretty neat. You know, I'm going to like this for doing using with the transducer. I just wanted to see what kind of image. Now, it's definitely not as convenient as the pinch to zoom, you know, but that's, you know, that's another thing. Like, because I didn't get this scope to replace that scope. This scope would be for something like exactly what happened. The primary ignition was knocking HScope off, and it hasn't knocked this off at all. So if primary ignition is going to be something, it's very easy for me to convert, being it's a tablet, to go straight from HScope to this. So it's pretty happy with it. You know, pretty happy it's able to get waveforms this easy. And we could see how much more detail there is in the ignition now, actually. Now this 50% button, if you hit it on channel 1, takes you right to the middle. So if we wanted to zoom more in on that ignition, we could see before we didn't have quite that much definition. So changing the deep memory up here to 20 million helped a little, you know, but once we get down zoomed in that close, you know, just on oscillation, it's a little bit more than you need to tell if this thing's misfiring or not. And then again, just like on HScope, the screen isn't quite as big because you do have these buttons the whole way around, but still, there's your burn line. I mean, it's very good. But I don't know if I'd waste the extra samples for ignition other than the timing. We're timing off of that spike, and it didn't really seem to make the transducer look any better. So I'd turn this up if you were going for the time. If you were going for a super long time base, that's when you're going to want that, because this is your definition for zooming in. And if you're going to zoom in and you want even more definition on one channel, you'll get 50 million mega points, or 50 million points that it's going to measure. So you're going to have a decent amount of detail, especially on one channel. Okay guys, let me show you setup real quick. I got the amp clamp back on, getting the primary current, getting the primary voltage, getting the fuel injector voltage, and I got the Rotkee pulse sensor in the back of the intake. It's very close to the throttle, so we're not getting a good representation of all 6 cylinders by any means. I would have probably looked for a better vacuum line available. I probably would take it, but for right now, that's fine, adapted in there. I'm just testing its ability to run on, you know, 4 channels basically. Got everything up and tucked out of the way. You can see the image we get there. I mean, it was almost instant. The only one that didn't come up, and I have it mislabeled, I have it under injector current, but that's the coil current. The current ramp, I didn't have the low pass filter on whenever I put it on, and I just changed the trigger to the coil, to the current ramp, and it's holding everything dead still in like a normalized trigger. But let me shut this off. I'm going to put the screen recorder on. I'm going to see how much information we could get on one screen and just take a little bit better look at it. But that's all 4 channels going at once. The injector we kind of lose until we get to a different screen there. But as you change your time base, that's where you get your, like here's the injector here. There's the spark event. This is the pulse sensor, the purple, and the green's the current ramp for the amp clamp. Okay, let me shut this off and I'll switch around. Yeah, sorry about the noise once again, but I got the exhaust fan going. Got the coil back in, the plug back in, everything's running good. Now this is all 4 channels. Now I do have this mislabeled. This isn't the injector current, this is the coil current. I don't like looking at that, so I'm going to just change it to, if you hit user defined, then it'll let you label with whatever you want to call it. We're going to call this coil current. And then see, it'll change it down there. And that, he's still on the 1 times. I wanted to see on 100 if the scale would change right. Yeah, because the coil isn't pulling that many amps. But it's 100 milliamps equals. So I'd prefer to just keep that on channel 4. Zooming in a little bit on the fuel injector. Move whatever channel you want to move around to wherever you're trying to line up. You could see the ignition events, you could see the current ramp. Change your scales, so I mean that's all on what you prefer to see. But the more you want to see the current ramp, we're in real time, so you'll see as I zoom in. Well, actually, it's not the zoom, guys. My mistake. See, this is where the pinch to zoom, I usually, you know, I like using that. But on our time base, the more we move our time base, the more we're going to see our current ramp. Now, this already looks peculiar, how it's holding it above ground here for a little bit, but, you know, like I say, we're not really looking for nothing, but you could see the ignition and the coil ramp. You could see the pulse sensor. That's not very usable zoomed in this far. The pulse sensor you want to use more zoomed out. And then the injector, naturally, we're not even on the same page as him. We have to zoom out. See, now the pulse sensor becomes a little bit more usable. But we're still no injector on the screen. If we move these down here, we could get the injector on the screen also. So that's not bad for one screen. The pulses don't look as even as, you know, some I've used this Rotkee sensor on. But like I said, that's not a very good place to put it. We're not, you want to try to get as close to the central in between all 6 cylinders, and we're right behind the intake favoring the passenger side bank. So they're not going to be even pulls. Now, if you're looking over longer periods of time like this, that's pretty decent. You change your scale so you don't have so many overlaps. Now what I'd like to do is we'll take up about 20. We're going to do the same thing, give it a couple revs. See how it holds up. We'll go down to 10. 10's pretty quick. Or it's more than enough time. Sorry, sometimes you're doing things that are hard to do at the same time. You're not really paying attention. Actually, I want to get up to just hold it at a higher RPM. See, that's what a 10-second screen, or 10-second per division. From afar to zoom in, we could see the pulse sensor changing under the rev, everything whenever you're zoomed out. When you zoom in, we still do have some nice detail. I do like that. I like how the ignition looks right there too. See the coil ramp. See the injector get pulled down. You see the pulse sensor, zooming in onto that isn't going to show us a lot. Plus I think we're off the screen on the top anyways. It cuts it off when you go to the menu. You could expand from here to find, yeah, the pulse sensor, I has underscaled it. But that would have gave us a little bit more under the rev. But now if you were looking from out here, the zoom function will get you in even closer to begin with. This waveform's only filling up part of the buffer. But the pulse sensor really comes alive under a rev, and that intake's changing. So that's pretty cool. I like that. And that would be all your measurements for any channel. And all you have to do is click the channel that you're measuring. And they'll change for it. Now that's what I was mentioning before about the saving. That's, you know, that's a different matter. If you want to save this as a screenshot, that's quite easy. If you want to save as a movie, just screen record, but you're not going to be able to come back and do any measurement. You're not going to be able to manipulate it in the scope software. So that's one of the big differences. But you know, I like that as a backup to HScope. I mean, it's pretty simple to use. I mean, it looks kind of like a Handtech style software, but the mouse is a lot more responsive with it, and you get a lot more features out of it. Now that's what I wanted to do, is briefly go over some of the automotive tests. I don't want to do too many more of them because I'd have to look in the schematics which ones to do the throttle body or the throttle sensor. To do some of the tests in here, I'd have to look up exactly which wire to back probe. So, but I do want to show you some of the features this has, just in case you're interested in it. I mean, so far I think it's a pretty fun scope, and you know, the biggest thing, it's not as quick as HScope, but you do get these 4 channels with a lot of information. Okay guys, here's some of the tests. If you just go to the little car, we have 12 volt charging, where we could do channel 1 is voltage, channel 2 is current, 24 volt charging, alternator AC ripple test. It gives you something like the Modus, only it's not vehicle specific. It's just telling you, please connect channel 1 with BNC banana. It has a Ford Smart alternator that has current, voltage, and voltage again. So it would be getting the, I believe the computer, it's probably pulse width, I mean, could be, to tell what to increase its duty cycle to. 12 volt start, current probe and voltage, 24 volt starter, cranking current. That would be like getting your cranking current and your RC test. Under sensors, you got ABS, digital type, analog, accelerator pedal. See, this would have been neat to get into maybe next time. Checking the accelerator pedal at the same time as you're checking like the throttle position sensor. I mean, you could, with 4 channels, you could get, even if you need 2 of them on each sensor, you have 4 channels, so you'd be able to see how they interact with each other. On the camshaft, Hall effects, AC excited, inductive. The AC excited, that sounds interesting. The coolant temperature, 5 volt. Vauxhall, it's voltage to the crankshaft, inductive Hall effect, and inductive running distributor, and this will set up your scales for you, and they'll get you on the screen. It's pretty, the presets will get you, you know, at least to where you could start adjusting them to, you know, whatever you're looking for. Like I said, some things we look for on a long time base, some things we look for on a very short time base. When we're checking it out and good, we're not really zooming in on anything. I mean, it could be any fault. So which way you go from that point, I mean, that's what the scope's all about. But it'll get you on the screen. If you're looking for something that goes over a long time base, you just keep increasing until, you know, until you're happy with the resolution. When you zoom, set it on its maximum, just walk away. It'll take, if you hit single acquisition up here, it'll just take out whole screen, then stop, so you can't miss it. Now, Lambada under there, that's where your O2s would be. It has, you know, titania, zirconia with heater, zirconia pre and post cat, map sensors, got different analog, digital, T-maps, road speed, throttle position sensors. And so here would be the 1 and 2. Like the accelerator pedal has 2 sensors, so you could have both of the throttle position sensors and both of the accelerator pedal sensors. So if you're having, a lot of times these Dodges, they go into limp mode if there's any discrepancy between them 4 sensors, and that would be a real easy way to check all 4 at once. Actuators, we've got carbon canister, diesel glow plugs, EGR solenoid valve, fuel pump current. The fuel pump, yes, that would be current. So idle speed control, we have rotary, electromagnetic, 4 and 5 wire. Injectors, and it asks you these because it's going to make a difference over here in the scales. The multi-point current, multi-point voltage and current, single point current, GDI volume, GDI current, GDI voltage, or this would be voltage. It's some of the abbreviations, but you get around them. GDI voltage and current. Injector, diesel injectors, you got Bosch CDI3, Delphi, Piezo, VAGPD. Pressure regulators, they got Bosch CDI3, quantity control. Not sure what it would be counting, but hey, it's in there. Throttle servo motor. Actually, it tells you a little bit more about the test on this one. Normally, the increasing of voltage is caused by the increasing of vehicle speed. Variable speed, variable valve. That'd be for your VVTs on the camshaft. The ignition, there's primary, voltage and current and signal for the smart coils. Secondary, you got voltage kV positive, voltage kV negative, coil output test, voltage millivolt. Primary and secondary at the same time. It's voltage on both in primary and another voltage, and that would be for the signal on that also. Networks, we have CAN high and low, we have LIN, FlexRay, and K-line. The next video I was going to do, I was hoping I got a chance to get to it today, but I'm going to try this out on the CAN high and low, because I have 4 scopes, I believe, and I haven't used them yet on, the only one I have used was the Modus on, and it didn't do very great on CAN signals, but I mean, it wasn't interpreting like it's a pretty old Modus. But the combination tests, you have crankshaft and camshaft, you have crankshaft and primary ignition and injector volume, crankshaft, camshaft, and injector. Your voltage, I keep saying volume when I see the VOL. I mean, just a V is fine for voltage. But that's all the tests that comes packed in it. I mean, that's actually a decent amount of tests to get you on the screen, to get you partway set up. It just saves you time of having to go back and forth. And then you still got to make your fine adjustments, but, you know, that's no big deal. Other than that, on the main menu, it's easy to clear anything you were measuring. Anything you want displayed, you just click it. And I'll be down here, and you could just clear it whenever you're done, because the scope does remember. When you come back, like after I shut this off, when I come back tomorrow, the camshaft, all my labels are going to be here. And one of the really cool things, I've lost that waveform. See, that's why I was kind of saying, but being the car's still here and hooked up, I'm going to get one little bit of it so I could show you how the reference channel works. What we're going to do is bring this injector over a little bit. See if I could get more of them on the screen. Okay, now I'm going to shut the car off. As my tablet battery's on 15%, but that should be enough to show you. This is one of the ways around not being able to save as easy as HScope. But what you can do, even though you're not saving a waveform, like, you know, the way we're accustomed to, we're saving a reference. So if you were doing one channel on this and you wanted channel 2, you move this to 2 if you want a channel 2's wave, channel 3's wave, or channel 4's wave. We're going after 2 for this injector. So I'm going to say channel 2, we're going to save that, and I'm going to save out to R1. Each channel has 4 reference. Now it says it's successful. Now you can pull it out and move the waveform. Now you have a reference. You could move, like if you change to another channel, check that injector, you could see, you always have this to compare it to. So if you move from cylinder to cylinder, you could just overlay these on each other and look for any difference. But now the only difference is you want to save this reference on the same time base as you're planning on overlaying them, because you see as we change the time base, the waveform changes, but not the reference. So that's pretty neat. You could recall it at any time, and you get to the reference straight up through this way, and then if you go to the channel menu, it'll ask you which one you want to recall for 1, 2, 3, 4. So you could have several. Say you could have as many as you want saved and keep recalling them. But you have to, it's kind of another channel to work around. It's a couple more channels you could use to work around things, but you know, many uses for that. And it's all just in, you know, what you happen to be working with that day. If you're moving from cylinder to cylinder, that's pretty good. That's going to be showing you showing you how long the injector's pulsing. If you go over and you find one that's way over here, I mean, and you put your reference form, and you make sure you're on the same time base, and boom, I mean, easy to find a problem like that. Even comparing the spikes as it's running. I wanted to make sure I shared that with you, and I'm just looking around for anything else on here that I thought was kind of either neat or odd or a drawback. And really, I mean, that's all there is to this. I mean, it's a really useful system. I mean, this is just for your triggers. You could have your trigger on any channel. Like I was just playing around, and I found it was easier on channel 4 to sync with the current ramp for the ignition coil. It kept the waveform perfect. So you can move that around. You can move that falling edge, the rising edge, fall, and dual. Or the edge isn't one. It's rise, fall, or dual.
So, and then you have the source. Any of the channels you could couple with DC or noise reduction. It does have AC coupling also. The hold off time, there's auto, normal, and mode. I'm not sure, that's just mode. I'm not sure what normal would be. Well, that would be for your trigger. So yeah, normalizing or an auto trigger. You do have the sample rate. That's where you see the one that took down here, we were on, being so we were running all 4 channels, we were sharing the bandwidth with them, but there's still plenty. You could put on auto, you could put it on the 50, you could force it in the 50 million or 10 million per channel if you have more than one channel. The display, I mean, you do have a brightness control. I mean, I thought it was pretty fine right there in the middle where it started. The horizontal reference, the trigger position or the center, this would be for your grid. You can't change the color. You could change the intensity of the grid, but you can't change the color, the back of the screen. I don't believe you can change the color for the individual channels either. There's a grid, frames, and intensity. I mean, it doesn't make a huge difference on the back of the screen. I mean, you could barely see the, like full, you could see the dots down here, you could see the crosshairs. The trigger's very, I mean, I like the way the trigger's set up. There's a lot of different situations you might be in when you want that on the falling edge and the rising edge, and it's very easy to change. And under the quick menu, that's where I was showing you the everything measurement. And then you also have your cursors, horizontal and vertical. This 50% does help out a lot too. And if you find yourself getting lost, what channel do you want to return right back to the middle? If it's channel 1, it'll bring it back. If you want channel 2 back in the middle, it'll bring it back. And that's about it, guys. It has a math channel. Same thing, you do the adjustments up here. Source 1, you could plus, minus, divide, or multiply. If you on the plus channel 1 with channel 2, so we get the math waveform. You can see as we change it, it changes different. Channel 2 minus. Channel 1 minus channel 2. You can see it's very fast. I mean, or you don't have to wait for anything on it. Easy to turn off. To get the reference channels or the math channels, you just hold in between the buttons and go up and slide up or down. You could have 4 reference channels if you want. So it does have a workaround. It'll save you a reference, but it won't save your whole waveform. So that's just one small thing that, you know, I've only used it a few times and already it's, you know, that's everything. There's actually more on the software of HScope where you could make smaller adjustments. Even though HScope has a lot more packed into it, it's easier to use right out of the box, if that makes any sense. But this is a simple one screen is everything. And I'll show you if I go to just say I went to Spotify, listen for the beat. The scope knows that, excuse me, that I left the program. So it's not gonna let me. I'm sorry, guys. I'm going to have to cut that. No. All right, guys. That's the beep it makes when you leave. I went to Spotify and it started playing music, so I'm gonna have to cut that little part out. But if you were on the MicSig software and say you wanted to use your calculator, hear the beep, the scope shut off altogether, so you can't, not altogether, the blue light's still on, but the scope is not active. So if you want to use an external screen recorder or anything, when you come back, all your channels are gone. So you have to resample and hear the beep again. The scope came back on because it knew its software was open. So every time you go anywhere else, like I have HScope open too. Let's see what happens when. See, I went to HScope. First thing it did was, beep. Told me, hey, you're not on there. So that's just a small thing, but it does come in like if there's programs people use for overlay, like Paint, that people put on Windows with, and you're not going to be able to on this, because as soon as you go to the program, it's going to be gone.
All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed that little bit. It was like nothing planned, just hooking both the scopes up, showing you how they both work. I mean, there's not a lot out there on the VATO. So there's some out there, but you could also look at the SATO. There's several different models of MicSig that it's almost the same software, but only they have buttons. They have a built-in tablet. They could save waveforms. They could recall waveforms. You could hook them up to HDMI. So yeah, there's a lot of benefits to having the enclosed unit, but is this something good in my toolbox? And that's one thing I definitely want to explain, that to me, it's one scope isn't replacing the other. I'm not looking for a better scope. I was perfectly happy with the 2-channel with the HScope and HS512. Now, that scope there has been redesigned. They call it the 512 Max. Now, it has the circuit board has a layer of protection on it to reject that EMI. I think I've seen Dennis saying 4 layers or something. So it's pretty shielded. That's what that spark was. But if you notice, then I notice almost every time I do it, sometimes it goes longer. Sometimes you got to move them leads around, try to get, a little bit of isolation. But yeah, that time I just couldn't get it to stay on. It's when the spark is in the spark tester that's when it gets knocked off. The paddle probe, it used to knock off every now and again, but using the EMI rejection, like if you go to Martin Lawrence's site for the HS512, the replacement cables, I actually ordered 2 of them whenever I ordered the non-max HS512. So that did help, that did help. And his attenuators too, the new style, they have a little bit of EMI rejection in them. That really helped. So, but on the primary, it just seems now whenever that coil is actually firing, Garen, you couldn't get that any further away from it. So, and plus I was on the cart way back, maybe I have a couple ferrite beads, but I don't think they'll fit around them the cables. But that's the only difference I notice on the MicSig, because we're running it on Android also. So it's either isolated inside or on its cable that connects it to the Android tablet. There's a ferrite bead on one on each side, one so the device doesn't get any electromagnetic interference or absorbs the frequency anyways, and the other one on the other end so it doesn't receive. So no big deal, but that's the whole purpose. I'm not looking to replace the scope. Now I feel pretty happy. I got the 4 channels, that works pretty good, and my biggest thing is if I can't fix it with 4 channels and everything I got, 40 minutes from Danner's Automotive, and I'm about an hour from State College in Pine Hollow. Those guys will help you out. I mean, but this is, I could quit looking scope-wise. Just keep learning how to use these. But you do need the 4 channels sometimes, and sometimes there's just a time you're going to need to check your scope, like with another scope, see which one's reading right, see, you know, to compare them, just like I did with the amp clamps. Now, that's on, I'm going to turn the screen around. I'm going to show you, because I did make the comment on the better the accessory is, the better images you get. And that's, you know, you can't just say that without, you know, following up, or otherwise it's just an opinion, right? But now, you've seen using the cheap Handtech, the paddle probe, the HT25. It was getting the ignition just like that Snap-on. There's a little more electronics in the Snap-on one, but we're still pulling the secondary ignition. It's getting that burn line right out of the secondary ignition. So, yeah, and it's night and day, the difference. Now, the next one I'm going to show you is on an amp clamp on a starter. Like I say, I had so many starters, and I was scoping every one of them. It was just like, you know, it was like going to school every day, because there was something else wrong with every one of them. And my amp clamp I knew was way off by a comment somebody left in on a couple of videos ago, and I checked it, you know, like, you know, they thought it seemed pretty high, so I figured I'd check it, and yeah, it did seem pretty high. I looked backward in waveforms, and there was a time when it wasn't that high, you know, so I know something happened over time, you know. But the difference of it is the detail of the AES wave. It does give you a better, it draws the pattern better, but in this case, its amperage is off. It's way overshooting. I still haven't gotten around to see if I can take it apart, if there's any kind of adjustment internally. But, you know, zeroing it out it does this consistently. Now, this starter was in a vise, so, you know, it's a lot of amperage for a vise, and you're thinking in your head, if something's like 500 amps right beside you, you know, it's something's up. All right, guys, let me flip this around and show you. Okay, the green one is the AES wave. We could see, well, can't see much there. The detail as you zoom in, they're both good detail. The green is the AES wave. The yellow is the Handtech. They're both 650 amp clamps. And it looks okay. The Handtech looks a little bit more rounded off, but what really gets you is like coming through, and this happened on several starters too, the yellow of the Handtech. It's picking it up on blocks. They're on the exact same scale. Well, actually, the one scale was 0.1 difference off for some reason. When channel 1's on, I forget what amperage I was on, but you couldn't make the channels exactly the same. But it's very close, and it got the presets for both amp clamps on there. And when you drop a cursor on, because the green scale's over here, and the Handtech's over here, and we're just, well, .492 amps. Well, we're a little above it. I could actually see it better on my phone. I can separate the waveforms, but it looks like the yellow one's higher, just the way I have it, but it's on this scale. It's 486 amps. And then what we actually are, 355. So, I mean, that's still, that's one lesson I learned over this. I mean, it sounds like a lot less amperage than, you know, 355. I mean, if you know, you can't really compare this to AC, because, I mean, shorting out your 200 amp house breaker box is going to make a bigger boom, and that thing did in the vise. So, you know, it's teaching me that, you know, that is a pretty big draw for being in a vise. It's not much more spinning the motor. So, That was one lesson learned. But as you zoom in, and remember the green one's the one that's not reading right. It's over 100 amps off. But you could see right in here, these get like stairs. But yet the AES wave still at least picks up something. Down here, they both pick up as dropout. I mean, it picks up a lot of the same things. I mean, it's very usable, but there's probably $100 difference between the two. You know, I like the definition of the AES wave, but the hand tech for $100, I'm going to deal with that right now for a $100 difference. But there is a difference. We've seen on the secondary, and we've seen on amp clamp. But all right, guys, thanks a lot for watching. I'm going to be, you know, doing more randomly like that. And as it does help without having a huge plan, because, you know, things that always do go sideways once you start something. So I think it's a little bit better of, like, if I have a pet peeve. Okay, guys, and one last final note. I got a lot of comments about using the MicSig software on a laptop. And you can. You have to run the virtual box or, you know, dual boot Android, but it's a native. That's what the VATO is for, the virtual automotive tablet oscilloscope. I'm choosing to stick with the tablet because, I mean, I could easily replace it on Marketplace or Walmart again. I mean, this thing's been through hell. If I could find it, there's a screen recording on it. I turned on when I was checking Ronnie's doing an RC test on his PT Cruiser. I didn't even check the windshield wipers. They were on. HScope and my tablet went flying across the alley. The 512, I mean, still worked fine. I mean, you could see me picking it up and hitting the button to stop the recording. I mean, I wish the camera was on so you could see how far it flew, but you could kind of hear it. But I mean, you know, stuff happens. But, you know, if the screen would have broke, I could easily replace it. There's stupid error. And, you know, but if that was my all enclosed tablet, like, you know, kind of like that big Modus, I don't think the wipers would have moved it. But if that was your only tool, now you're out of scanner, you're out of scope, and you're out of screen until you send that out and get repaired. Nobody's repairing anything fast anymore. No, I mean, it's, you're taking your chance sending it back to repair other than trying to do it yourself, you know, because you don't know when you're going to get it back. So this way, keeping things individual, I figure if one breaks, I could just, you know, work on that. And the parts that can be most prone to break is going to be your screen. So unless you overvolt it or something. But other than that, you know, my honest opinion is I wish I would have found the 512 and HScope years ago whenever I first started, like, you know, watching videos. I would have been able to follow along more with Danner, because after I bought the Handtech, it kind of had that, I'm going to follow along with Danner with this. And, you know, no, I mean, you can do things. You can do things. But whenever Danner talks about, you know, changing these time bases and doing, and, you know, running a bunch of fast signals, you know, a 4-channel you could follow along with good. I mean, a 2-channel, you could do a lot of what he does on there. And the HScope is so much easier to learn. If you've never used any, Pico software is very good, but HScope's going to be a lot easier to get you on the car and test it. You know, if you're used to some kind of laptop-based oscilloscope, I mean, you're going to be a little bit ahead. You might want to stick that way, end up with, you know, going the Pico route. This, you know, I like sticking with Android. I like being able to run either that, the MicSig or HScope on my phone. Any Android phone, I mean, HScope runs beautiful on. You know, don't got an old phone. You know, replace your phone, didn't trade it in. That's your portable screen. You know, you could Velcro 512 to the back of it if you wanted to. You know, there's all kinds of things. But I mean, to me, that's universal. To you, if you're going the laptop route, you know, if you know you want to end up with a Pico, start with a Handtech, because you're going to want to upgrade your laptop. You know, doesn't even have to be at 1008C. I mean, you could get a better one or something like that, but start with a PC-based scope. You know, the only one I have is the Handtech 1008C. And You know, it looks more like the MicSig software, but your hardware is going to be your laptop. You know, a tablet, we don't even need a good tablet for HScope. I mean, it runs fine on cheap tablets. That one's had a broken screen since I brought it in the garage. And, you know, I've had it hanging over hot engines, and, you know, I keep it away most of the time, but, you know, keep hitting it with greasy fingers. I mean, you have to look up a wiring schematic, and I'd rather have a screen protector and use either my mouse or my fingers than, you know, get grease in them keys, you know, on the laptop. That's just me. You know, you might do this a lot, want to analyze it later on a Pico, which, you know, that was the drawback of the MicSig. If you want to re-look at that, the only thing you have is snapshots or, you know, screen recordings. If anybody knows how to load these into another program, please drop a comment, because that's one of the strong points of HScope, being able to get back in them waveforms, share them. You could download people's waveforms. You could share them with each other. On the MicSig, I mean, you'd just be sending somebody an MP4. So, you know, that's a drawback, but it's one I'm willing to make because I have HScope for that. You know, it's one or the other. I like the detail, and then I like the power. I like it. If one don't do it, let's try it on another scope. Just like we didn't get knocked off with the primary or with the pressure transducer, we didn't get knocked offline. No, I mean, with the MicSig, no matter what the test is, if one scope wasn't doing it, I'd just switch that easy. That's why I like that, guys. All right, let me know what you think. Have a good one. Adios.